Hey YouTube, long time no talk. Let's talk a little bit about cluster breathing, what it is, and why you need to know it for lifting. So, cluster breathing is originally a medical term that is used to define a series of abnormal breathing patterns followed by apnea. Apnea being just a total cessation of breathing. What we see with this usually is people that have brain bleeds is the most common, and it's when you're bleeding into your brain. You only got so much space up here in the box to accommodate that bleeding, so it starts to herniate your brain down onto your brainstem, applies pressure, and then you get a really irregular heart rate and a really irregular breathing pattern. Generally speaking, you're going to die. So, on that happy note, let's talk about cluster breathing. So, cluster breathing, we see it a lot in the hospital with traumatic brain injuries, MVAs, motor vehicle accidents, anything where there may be potential damage to the C-spine, the brain stem, or like I said, the brain herniating down. Super shitty when this happens, and it's an early warning sign for us that something's about to go really wrong really fast. So cluster breathing looks a little bit like hyperventilation, all right? So it's your body is just trying to get oxygenation, right? So it's these really short breaths that your body's trying to do everything it can to oxygenate, but unfortunately the signals are getting all kerfuffled, and then you get an apneic period where your body's just like, I don't really know what the fuck I'm doing right now. I don't know what to do. I gotta fix this. Oh, let's try breathing again. Um, Now, cluster breathing has actually been adopted by powerlifters and bodybuilders for quite some time now, and the reason is it's really super effective at hyperoxygenating the body. And I have spoken before about hyperoxygenation with lifting, so let's talk a little bit about how to utilize cluster breathing before lift. So when you want to use cluster breathing, you're not going to want to breathe through your mouth, all right, because that can lead to hyperventilating, and you don't want to go ahead and do that. But what you want to do is use your nose. And what you're going to do is you're going to actually use a specific timed amount of breaths, or just until you feel like you want to go ahead and lift. And you're going to breathe through your nose and out through your mouth in very short in and out breaths. So you don't want big breaths because you're going to make yourself fucking dizzy and you're going to end up passing out before a lift. So none of this shit. I'm getting dizzy just doing that. Don't do that. All right, you do that before a lift, you're going to end up making yourself dizzy. But little short cluster breathings of followed by one big fuck off breath right before you're going to do a heavy lift or just a big pull or whatever it is that you're doing. And that's that apneic period we talked about, right, where there's cessation of breathing. That's why they still call it cluster breathing, because it is cluster breathing. It's an abnormal series of breathing followed by an apneic period. So you're going to look a little bit like this. And right at that big inhale, that's when you're doing your big lift. That's when you're pulling, that's when you're benching, that's when you're doing whatever the fuck it is that you're doing. Now, the nice thing about cluster breathing is you're getting appropriate oxygenation to the body, you're not gonna make yourself dizzy, and you're gonna get that nice big deep breath in that's gonna create that inner thoracic pressure for your bench, your deadlift, your overhead press, your back squat, your fucking bicep curls. I don't care what you're doing with it, but it's gonna be effective for getting that inner thoracic pressure, filling your lungs, filling your diaphragm, filling your stomach so you can make your lift on time. The other thing too is because of the short cluster breaths that you're taking, if you've got 500 pounds sitting on your back, you know all too well that as you breathe out, your body starts to collapse because you're removing that inner thoracic pressure and then trying to build that shit back up. Really painfully tough to do, right? Same with like a deadlift. You know, you do a big deep breath in and breathe out deep, and all of a sudden you collapse in on yourself, and trying to reposition yourself with a deep breath sucks. So with cluster breathing, you got the bar on your back, you're nice and tight, and you're only doing like little in and outs, right? You're not emptying your lungs, right? And it's going to allow you to keep a lot of that inner thoracic pressure there because you're not completely depleting your lung volume down to its like residual 1.5 liters or whatever it is that your lungs normally have. It might actually be 0.5. I don't fucking know. I'm not a doctor. I'm a nurse. There's a difference. I went to school for less time, and I get to play that card whenever I want to. Excuse me, is my mother going to be okay? I don't really know, but I'll talk to the doctor for you. I know, but it's an easy cop-out. For all those of you out there that want to be a nurse one day or that deal with nurses, we do this all the time because we don't get paid as much as they do, and they can go ahead and answer questions we don't want to. Moving on. So what it'll allow you to do is allow you to stay tight in the lift, get oxygen to your body without having to lose that tightness, and then that last breath is just making that last little last little volume, not tidal volume. Tidal volume is the lowest part, like that deep breath out, filling up your lungs, filling up your diaphragm, getting everything ready to go. I recommend that you use these for like big pulls, right, or big lifts. Sorry, your heaviest sets of deadlifts, back squats, everything. You know, if you're doing something like 5 or less reps, right? A good example is if you're going for like heavy doubles and triples, cluster breathing is great for that, right? Because it allows you to stay tight, stay heavy. If you're going for sets of 10, this is probably something that you can just breathe normally with, right? A good example of this is like going to pull 600 pounds. You need to have your shit together to pull 600 pounds, right? You need the internal bone pressure. You need everything to be nice and tight, and you got to lift perfectly to get that 600 pounds off the ground. But if you're going to do, you know, a set of 10 at like 350, 375, you probably don't even need air in your goddamn lungs because you're just going to be so strong that you're going to be able to pull that normally. So you don't really need to worry too much about cluster breathing with the lower end sets with lighter weights. It's when you get to the heavier weights. That's when cluster breathing really comes in handy. I didn't invent this. Clearly, we learned this from dying patients who had bleeds or traumatic brain injuries or C-spine injuries, which sucks. But it allows us as medical professionals to be able to learn the early stages that shit's going wrong. And then somebody one day turned around and said, you know, if the brain's doing that to save the body and hyperoxygenate so that the body doesn't die, bet I could lift with that. So God bless that person who came up with that, because it really does work. And you do sometimes see a lot of high-end lifters do this before lifts. Not all of them are going to do it. It's individualistic. It has to do with your own body, how you feel that you want to breathe before a lift. But breathing is one of the biggest things that people do wrong that I see in the gym. People just breathe normally when it's like, yeah, that's not what you got to do, right? You're not creating proper intrathoracic pressure. You're not keeping yourself tight. You're just, whatever. Anyways, you guys get the point. Point is, breathing is individualistic, but this can help you get a good rough idea to start on how to be breathing and holding your breath before big heavy sets. Like I said, 5 or less reps, you know, this is a good way to do it, because you can do a rep, do some cluster breathing, hold your breath, do a rep, do some cluster breathing, hold your breath, do a rep, right? No need to do it for sets of 10, but sets of 2 with really heavy weight with like 550 on your back, you might want to go ahead and consider it. That's all I'm saying. Questions, comments down below. Any questions, let me know. It's nothing new. It's been around for a while, but not a lot of people practice it. You have to be careful with how shallow your breaths are, because if you do it too fast or you do it too shallow or too deep, you're going to end up making yourself dizzy. So practice makes perfect. It sounds super retarded, but just practice breathing when you're sitting there looking in the mirror, or you're just sitting there doing absolutely nothing, just to get it right. Because if all of a sudden you start feeling dizzy, you know you're going too deep or too shallow. Make adjustments until you can just simply do this for fucking ever, and you don't get dizzy and you don't feel like shit, right? That's it, guys. I would personally recommend doing a series of cluster breaths timed, or not timed, but a certain number. So say 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever the fuck you want to do before your big breath, so that you can really cue yourself to do a big lift. Because if you're just doing it at random times, you're not cueing your body to get tight. But if you always do 5 cluster breaths followed by 1 deep inhale, as you get to that 5th one, your body's getting cued, okay, it's fucking game time, guys. All right, that's it. Hope this was helpful. Post comments down below. And as always, guys, eat like a bodybuilder and train like a powerlifter.